Hello, my name is Jen Lee, and I am with Jen Lee Law. And you are on the webinar, The Elephant in the Room. Do you know the cost of financial stress in your workplace? And thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to go through a couple things today, a little bit of background about me, and then some interesting statistics that are coming up every year in financial wellness surveys regarding financial stress in the workplace and why we should all be concerned with it, and then finally what to do about it. So first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Jen Lee. I am a lawyer in California, and we have offices in San Francisco, San Ramon, and Tracy, and we are debt and credit strategy attorneys. Just very briefly, what that means is I used to be a bankruptcy attorney doing strictly bankruptcy work, and I found that there are a lot of people out there who need more help than just a bankruptcy. They could use help earlier in the process, and if they had had help earlier, they probably wouldn't need to have gone down a drastic route like bankruptcy. And so we work with people from all walks of life trying to figure out debt and credit issues that they're having. So we have offices, as I said, in San Francisco, San Ramon, and Tracy, California, and focus on anyone who is struggling with debt and credit problems. They may have money, but they may still have debt or credit problems. This is our mascot. Her name is Bernadette. And Bernadette is something that came about a year ago when I was looking into this financial stress problem, and she's the elephant in the room. And the reason why I started using that phrase and that topic is because as I was researching and looking at my clientele and the people who needed help, I found that 51% of Americans have a debt or credit problem of some sort, but everyone thinks they're alone. And so I tell people, when you walk into a room, imagine half of the room has the exact same problem and no one wants to talk about it. So it's this elephant in the room no one wants to talk about, but everyone needs a little bit of assistance sometimes. I also refer to the Facebook phenomenon a lot. You go on Facebook or social media, whatever the hot app is in social media, and everyone is usually posting about how great their life is. They just went on vacation. And you don't really want to hear stuff on Facebook about negative people. You kind of get a reputation as always posting negative stuff. People are going to hide you from their feed. But it makes it very lonely. It makes you think you're alone and that no one else is struggling with these issues when really everyone's just trying to put up a positive face so that no one else knows you're struggling. So the Facebook phenomenon has been psychologically a very interesting thing to look at from a debt and credit perspective because everyone thinks they're alone when really half the world has the same problem. So Bernadette is our mascot, and the room is full of elephants. It's not just one elephant anymore. As I was doing research on financial stress in the workplace, I found that there are a herd of elephants basically stampeding to the workplace. And everyone from top down to the bottom is trying to look the other way and ignore the herd of elephants. So when I was writing a white paper last year about this topic, that's how the elephant in the room concept came about, was people are aware that this problem exists, that there are debt and credit problems and financial stress issues, but everyone tries really hard to look the other way and not acknowledge it. And I hear it from business owners saying, I don't really want to know about my employees' financial issues. And the employers and the employees saying, I really don't want my employer to know I'm having problems. But then it comes up that it's costing the company money. So that's where the room full of elephants is there. It's everywhere. It's in every workplace. It's even at big, huge companies. They all have the same problem. So here is our elephant in every room. Debt. No one wants to talk about it. It's not like a topic you're going to go on Facebook or go to your coworkers and say, hey, guess what? I have $50,000 in credit card debt. It's not a topic that, and we don't want people talking about it anyway like that. But money is the leading cause of stress. And so all of these things combine to cause a huge problem that people are ignoring. 80% of employees deal with their financial problems at work. And I should clarify that statistically. 80% of employees admit that they deal with their financial problems at work. So the number is probably higher because when you're filling out a survey for your employer, or you're filling out a survey, chances are there are people who didn't admit that they actually deal with their financial problems at work. That adds up. It's approximately 3 hours per week is estimated. So that's over 150 hours per year that employees are spending on their own personal financial problems while they're on company time. The average cost to an employer, and this was in 2010, there was a Department of Labor study that was done. And the average cost to an employer for the time that employees are spending on their personal financial issues at work was estimated at that time to be $7,000 per year per employee. So imagine if you have 100 employees at your company. You are losing $700,000 per year just in productivity and absenteeism and distractedness because of your employees' financial stress. I know people don't want to hear that. If you have 500 employees, that number jumps to $3.5 million a year that you could be recapturing into your productivity. So again, going back to my elephant, is it's there. It's in every workplace, whether people want to admit it or not. And I'm really trying to bring attention to the problem so that employers can develop programs and have services available to employees that can help recapture that lost cost. So here are just some overall general statistics from financial stress in the workplace. The total cost in the US is estimated at $300 billion per year that employers are losing. Again, it's 150 hours per employee per year, an average of 3 hours per week is what it comes out to. It's also shown to cause an increase in workers' compensation premiums. Employees who are financially stressed tend to be distracted, often staying up all night worrying about things, and they have more accidents at work. Also, an increase in medical insurance premiums. 70% of illnesses are attributed to stress. So, since financial stress is one of the main causes of stress in general, 70% of illnesses can be attributed to medical insurance premiums. So the more medical insurance employees are using, the higher premiums are going to go. My issue with a lot of programs out there, and I believe employees are assets. Employees are assets. If you appreciate employees, they appreciate and value. And understanding that helps the employer to develop programs and that kind of thing that will help this issue. There is a huge disconnect right now in the marketplace between financial literacy programs and what employees actually need for crisis management. And that's the main topic of most of my studies, my white paper that I've done, is on this huge disconnect. And it seems like sometimes you're standing in the middle of a room screaming and no one will listen. And so I decided to start screaming louder, because I've read studies and studies and studies, and they all come down and say, oh yeah, we need more financial literacy. We need more financial literacy in this company, which is true. I agree. Financial literacy is a huge component that's missing in schools. It's missing just in life in general. And I agree financial literacy would help as a precursor to many problems. But once the employee has a problem, or once a person has the problem, financial literacy does very little to help them. So here are some buzzwords that come up when we're talking about financial literacy. And when I was reviewing programs that are out there, I was reviewing studies, and one of the studies is included as part of your downloads available for this webinar. These are the buzzwords that came up in those workshops: budgeting, money management, financial education, wealth protection, financial wellness. And the problem with many of these words is they're associated with products that can be sold. Insurance products a lot of times, investment products. And the biggest problem I have is that a lot of employees come to me, a lot of people come to me and say, I wish I could contribute to my 401k. My company offers these great budgeting seminars. They offer these great programs on what investments I should be in, but I can't even afford to buy groceries for my kids, let alone think about how I would invest money that I don't have. So getting them to the point where they can use the financial literacy programs is the big disconnect that I see. These are the actual employee financial problems that are out there, which most of the buzzwords on the previous page do not fix. Wage garnishments. This is usually when HR gets a notification that something is going on. They receive a wage garnishment to withhold. And in some states, there is no wage garnishments. In California, employers have to garnish up to 25% of wages. And there are exemptions to that depending on level of income, but up to 25% of your gross income can be taken through a wage garnishment. So imagine you go into work one day and you find out your paycheck is 25% less. You were barely making ends meet before, and now it's 25% less. No amount of budgeting and financial wellness seminars are going to help that. 401k loans, this is the biggest red flag. If you go through your payroll and you notice more than probably 10% of your employees have 401k loans, that's a huge red flag. 401k loans should be, I can't even think of a situation where a 401k loan would be a legitimate usage for something, because it's a never-ending cycle. It's almost as bad as payday loans, because as soon as the 401k loan ends, they tend to come back and get another one. And there was one company I met with that was offering 2 or 3 401k loans at a time. And so by the time the employee got their paycheck, they were getting very little of their paycheck because it was all going to 401k loans. So they were getting further and further in the hole, including taking out payday loans to offset when the 401k loans weren't coming in. So it's a very vicious cycle. And that's one of my main red flags I look for when I talk to a company is if there's a number of 401k loans, what's going on? Why are the employees taking out 401k loans all the time? Past due taxes are another big issue that I see, even with W-2 employees. I see it a lot with 1099, and I see it a lot with self-employed people, but even W-2 employees with past due taxes, the IRS can also do a wage garnishment, and they can do bank levies as well. Student loans. So as of the time of the recording of this webinar, we're mid-July 2018, and student loans are at $1.5 trillion and going up from there. Even companies that have high income earners have student loan problems. And I am seeing more and more people who don't know their rights when it comes to student loans. They don't know what options are available. There are approximately 55 federal repayment plans for student loans, and no one knows what they are, it seems. So student loans can be a huge financial problem. And again, a workshop on budgeting is not going to help with that. Credit card lawsuits, again, the credit card lawsuits, I had an employee one time, before I went to law school, I was working at a really big company and I was managing there. And I had an employee who got served with a lawsuit at work, which was hugely embarrassing for her. And also it's a little strange too, but had I known then what I know now, I would have approached it differently. I didn't know what to do for her at the time when she was served with this lawsuit at work. So credit card lawsuits can be embarrassing to the employees. They can disrupt the work activity and that kind of thing. Foreclosures, even when the market is good, there are still foreclosures going on. We're in an up market right now, and I still have several foreclosures going on. So that, again, is an actual employee financial problem that I see all the time. Obtaining a mortgage. So now getting into more of the credit side of things, a lot of people don't know what they need to do in order to get a mortgage as far as their credit score goes. And there are some really good mortgage people out there who will help with running credit and seeing where they need to be. But a lot of employees spend a lot of time at work Googling and trying to figure out how they're going to increase their credit score. So I see that a lot. And the last one is identity theft. This isn't the employee's fault usually. It's just identity gets stolen, they have their credit score takes a huge hit, and they don't know what to do with it. So again, they're often at work Googling, trying to figure out what to do. So those are the actual employee problems that I see versus the buzzwords that financial management and financial literacy problems try to erase. A couple of case studies, because again, stories tend to speak louder than just words of what's going on. And these are both situations I've run across. So here again is the wage garnishment, where the Human Resources Department gets a wage garnishment order for a collection lawsuit. So first of all, the employee is super embarrassed. She comes in and she's like, I didn't know I was being sued, or I think he did know he was being sued, didn't know what to do about it, didn't know who to ask, didn't want to let anyone know that there was a problem at all, because as soon as you go ask a friend or a family member, hey, do you know someone who can help with a wage garnishment issue? Red flags go off and people are like, why? What problems are you having? And so people don't want to admit it. So now the employee is sitting at work on their computer trying to call lawyers, begging with the creditor to stop the wage garnishment, applying for second jobs to make ends meet. I've seen this many times in companies where they had no idea that their employee was sitting at work applying for other jobs or second jobs. I've seen both. I've seen people trying to apply for higher paying jobs and then also for just second jobs after hours to try to make ends meet. It's a huge waste of productivity. And also the employee's not thinking about their job at that point. They're thinking about their personal life and what they can do. And so it's kind of a double whammy. The second one on here is very common as well. Saving up, the employee's been saving up for a couple of years to buy a house. Didn't know that when she went to apply for the mortgage, she found out her credit score was too low to qualify for a good rate. And she has no idea what she needs to do now to start fixing it. She doesn't know why her credit score is low. And then at work, she's spending time looking up what to do, how do I increase my credit score is probably one of the most common things Googled, and making phone calls to find out what she can do and not knowing where to turn for help that won't be an embarrassing thing where she has to admit that she has a low credit score. There are all kinds of credit score workshops out there, and there's some mortgage brokers who do a really good job at explaining credit scores. The problem tends to be is people don't want to be in the room with other people knowing that they have a problem like that, a credit score problem. And even if it's not all their fault, there could be something where there was an identity theft issue, or it was a long time ago something happened. It still is embarrassing for people. So it's a very private problem, and that tends to be why workshops and people coming into the workplace and having sessions in a workplace aren't usually a good fit for these types of problems. So one of the things I try to talk with managers, HR directors, owners of companies about in order to identify red flags or warning signs, because no one's going to come, well, I shouldn't say no one. Very rarely is someone going to come and outright say, hey, can you refer me to someone who can help with my debt or credit problem? It just doesn't come up like that in conversation unless someone's really desperate. So the things I tell managers and HR people to look out for so that you can address it tactfully are things like 401k loans. If someone's coming and taking repeated 401k loans, and it depends how your company's process works. Some companies require manual approval from HR for every 401k loan. Some of them are pretty automated with the third-party custodian of the 401k. So it kind of depends on your company's setup. But if you have a employee who's calling you for a 401k loan and they're calling you repeatedly to see if you've approved the 401k loan, that's one of the biggest warning signs that something is going on and additional help probably is needed. Requests for salary advances. I didn't see these for a while, and now we're seeing a lot more people asking their jobs for salary advances. And from a business owner standpoint, I don't generally recommend salary advances because then you're putting yourself in the hole often, and you never know what's going to happen with the economy and a downturn. So salary advances to me are a little bit of a risky business, but if you have an employee who regularly comes in asking for salary advances, that's a big warning sign. Internet activity, there's all kinds of things out there. Some companies monitor internet activity very closely, some don't monitor it. But if someone who is constantly on the internet and Googling around for debt and credit issues, it depends on what you're tracking. But the first place people go is to Google for a lot of these problems. And most of the time, and I have several articles I've written on this, Google is wrong. Not Google itself, but the results are often incorrect advice, especially depending on the state that person is in. Personal phone calls at work. So when I was in management before law school, cell phones were not that big of a thing. So I'm telling you how old I am. Cell phones really weren't a thing that people had. So personal phone calls people were using their main office line or phone line to make personal phone calls. Now with cell phones, it's harder because people can sit on their cell phones and it's harder to track. But a lot of personal phone calls at work are a big red flag. Collection calls to HR. So a lot of collection companies and attorneys will call HR to confirm employment, to try to get a hold of someone when they can't reach the debtor themselves. Wage garnishment, again, we're getting down into the bright red flag. If there's a wage garnishment, there's an issue. Unexplained absences. So a lot of times there are court hearing dates, or they again stayed up all night because they were worried about the situation. The same thing with tardiness, being late. And then finally, if a process server shows up out at the place of employment, that's a pretty big red flag or warning sign. So what can you do about it? What can employers do in order to combat this problem? The first thing, and I came up with several solutions for this, and I've also included them in my white paper with more description. But the first thing is to realize that there's a problem. I can't tell you how many employers I talk to that their view on this is that they don't want to deal with it. They want nothing to do with knowing about the problem. They want nothing to do with knowing about their employees' financial issues. And whether you want to know about it or not, the problem is there, and there is a lot of room for recapturing productivity and improving your bottom line. And so I'm a big proponent of looking at how things affect the bottom line. So first of all, recognize that there is a problem in every workplace and be committed to try to find innovative solutions for that. The first thing that I've suggested is financial partnerships. And financial partnerships are, for example, a bank, a mortgage company, a student loan company. Sometimes there are really good local programs for helping employees with low deposit, no fee bank accounts. A mortgage bank can come in and help employees with getting mortgages. And then as far as financial partnerships go, just having those relationships available for employees can be very helpful. And that gets into a little bit of financial education. So financial education is great. Financial education and financial literacy are great things to help prevent the problems from happening. They are not as great for solving the problem once it gets too far down the line. And so financial education, having workshops and seminars, having an online portal for people available is great. And educating people on finances in general is a good thing. This morning I was talking to someone, and they were talking about a friend who's in her 30s, and she has a 403B through her employer, and she is scared to death to try to figure out what that means. She doesn't know what a 403B is. She doesn't know what she should be doing for retirement. So financial education is a great thing. The more education we can get for people, the better. Financial legal counseling is where I am going with the disconnect. So financial legal counseling relates to the actual crisis management, problem solving, and coming up with a plan for dealing with specific problems unique to each employee. And so, of course, this is where I have developed programs for things like this, because I found this huge disconnect, and I've got so many people coming to me and asking me, what do we do with this? And that's part of my solution, is to introduce this program for financial legal counseling. And I'll get into that in the next couple slides and go over exactly what that entails. Retirement and savings opportunities. So there was an interesting statistic study done that showed employers who automatically enroll employees at 3% for their 401k have a much better rate of savings, 401k savings, and people don't opt out. So generally speaking, how it's traditionally been done, when you start with a new employer, they give you the 401k forms and say, hey, if you want to contribute to your 401k, fill out this form, return to HR, or they go online and fill out their intake packet for their hiring packet. So you had to opt in. And a lot of people don't opt in because, first of all, they don't understand how 401ks work, or they think, oh, I can't give up any percent of my salary because I'm barely making enough to live on as is. And when people were were opted in automatically, they don't really opt out. They just stay in it and they get used to that amount of payment each month. So that's one trick or tool that employers can use for retirement and savings opportunities. Making sure that you have a retirement plan, understanding that Social Security is not going to be enough to live on for most people, that employees do need to have retirement and savings opportunities. And the final thing on my list here is aging population resources. And I didn't really talk about this as part of the financial part, but more so from the point of stress. And as the population is aging pretty drastically, we have a lot of 55 and 65 and older, and the baby boomers are all reaching retirement at this point. And it's becoming burdensome sometimes on their kids to try to manage their care, and financially as well. So it's financially stressful. So if you have aging population resources such as caregivers, a company you can partner with to help with providing care for an aging population. And if you want more ideas on this, please feel free to reach out to me, because I do have several partners I work with that I recommend for aging population, because it's going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger issue, and it costs billions of dollars a year for employees to take care of their baby boomer parents and older generations as well. So this is a hot button topic these days as well. So going back to financial legal counseling, this is what I developed to help solve this problem as employers were coming to me. And I came up, the name of the program is Employees Are Assets, and the goals are increasing the bottom line is the overall goal of the program. But individual workforce morale, happier employees are more productive. So that increases productivity. Happier employees and people who don't have that financial stress don't have the distractedness that comes with errors and accidents at work. It also reduces turnover because you're showing that you care about the employees and their well-being. It reduces absenteeism. The goal is to decrease insurance premium rates, both for workers' comp and for medical insurance. And also increase employee loyalty and commitment. The job market and it's hard to get good employees. It's hard to keep them. So being invested in their financial future is a great way to increase their loyalty and commitment. And the difference between, again, the financial literacy programs and actual legal coaching for these problems is that it's individualized to the employee. It's not an online webinar. It's not a workshop on site. It's individualized to each employee. It provides an action plan and solutions based on the employee's legal rights and options. So I am not a financial planner where I go in and say, oh, you should have this insurance, you should have this. I will refer them to financial planners if we're going through and figuring out what they need. But the purpose of the discussion with the employee is to find out what their legal rights are, what their options are, and then go through what their life looks like in 3 to 5 years, and if that meets their goals. A lot of legal advice is missing that component of, okay, where do you want to be? What are we trying to get to? And what kind of rights do you have to get there? The programs are tailor-made for the employer. So I go in with the employer to figure out what their goals are, and if they want sessions with their HR team, if they want managers to be trained on how do I spot this problem in the workplace, I have a separate on-site presentation that I do for managers to talk about what they should be looking for, what they can do, how to tactfully bring these things up, how to present the program so that employees aren't offended. Because again, people don't want to talk about this. I've also had employers ask me to do on-site presentations for family members about student loans, about not co-signing your kids' student loans. That's a huge issue. I've got many clients whose Social Security is being garnished because of their children's student loans. And when you're only making $1,500 a month on Social Security and they're taking 15% of that, that's a big difference. It also allows the employer to not be involved with the employee's financial issues. Again, that's the complaint I hear all the time from employers is we don't want to know. I don't want to know about their individual financial issues. It's just too much stress and too overwhelming for me, and I don't want to be liable for anything that they tell me. So the way that I set up the program was the relationship is between the employee and the attorney, not the employee, the employer, and the attorney. So we kind of removed that middle ground so that the employer knows that the problem is being solved and the employee gets to have private, confidential advice. And finally, I've had a few people ask me, what's the difference between the Employees Are Assets program and an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, if you've seen that. And a lot of benefits, people put that in as an add-on with insurance products. So this isn't an insurance product. This is a consulting fee the employer pays. And we are not trying to be everything to everybody with very little impact. I tested out several EAPs before launching this program, and what I found was in one case, I got no return information at all. A second one, I got a 15-minute free consult with a lawyer, and they gave me incorrect advice and didn't explain any of my other options. They just gave me the option that they were able to help with. And then the third one, they offered to send me a DVD to help me with budgeting. And so EAPs can be very good for things like mental health issues at times. I've had employees that use them in the past. But this program is specifically designed to problem solve a huge need in the workplace, not be everything to everybody with very little impact. Some resources. I do have a white paper that I wrote last August called The Elephant in the Room. It's available on my website at jenleelaw.com. Also in your downloads for today, PwC does a employee financial wellness survey every year. And so I've linked to the most recent one in 2018. And this was very interesting. It's about 45 pages long, and it goes through a ton of information about what millennials want to see, what employees are thinking about their financial wellness programs at work, and what they would prefer to see. Fascinating statistics. And I got down to the bottom of it, and I was like, they didn't bring up anything that would solve the problem. They brought up all these financial planning solutions, but nothing that would actually solve the problem. So a very interesting survey. And then finally, the American Psychological Association does a Stress in America announcement every year, or twice a year. And the one in 2014 was about paying with our health and how much stress affects healthcare costs, our health in general. And so that was an interesting review as well when we're talking about financial stress and the effects it's having in the workplace. So those are resources that are available. I have a ton of other resources and studies that I've used, and I'm happy to share those with people if you're interested. If you want more information on the Employees Are Assets program, you can check out our website. If you want to set up a call with me, or you want to present this to other people that you think may be interested, I do a lot of presentations for employee benefits brokers and for HR consultants who are trying to figure out how to solve interesting problems in the workplace. And I think this is one of the biggest problems in the workplace these days. And so I'm happy to customize programs and that kind of thing. I will open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type in the chat box, and I will read the question and then answer it as we're going here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I usually try to get through the presentation first and then answer questions at the end. So I do have a couple that have posted. And the first one is, the first one is, what types of employers see the biggest problems with financial stress? It's a good question. When I was first starting out looking at this problem, I thought that it would be mainly a program or a problem in like administrative assistant, like white collar type jobs, because that's where I came from and I saw it at work a lot. And so as I was getting into it, I had a construction company reach out to me, and a lot of them are going through cyclical up and down cycles with the market. And so their employees would have really high income, that be working overtime, and then they would have no income for a certain period. And then when they come back, they would have wage garnishments because they were up and down with this. And so when I first started, I thought it would be strictly a white collar program. Interesting enough, I've had a lot of blue collar, and I found that this transcends most industries. I even have law firms that have talked to me because the student loan issues. Lawyers have a lot of student loans, and it causes problems in the workplace. So the typical employer is pretty much any employer. I mean, a smaller company may not see it as much. They may be a little bit more involved. Like the 2 to 10 employee range may not be quite. Although I will say I had one employer who had 11 employees and 3 of them had wage garnishments. So they were very interested in me. We fixed a whole lot of problems for not very much money because it's the pricing for the program is based on the number of employees. So I will say that I was surprised at how it kind of went across different industries. But generally, kind of the sweet spot is the 25 employee up to about 500. So on the small to mid-sized companies see the most impact from it because, again, 50% of the country has a debt or credit problem. So generally speaking, half of your workforce has some kind of financial stress issue. The next question that came up, and thank you for that question. I'll read the question, then I'll try to answer. What does this program actually do for the employee, is what the question says. So for the employee, what they get is they get a one-to-one session with an attorney licensed in the state that they're in. And right now we're in California, and I'm also licensed in North Dakota, so I can meet with employees there. But as we are adding employees within other states, we're working on adding attorneys there as well. So what that gets is a one-to-one session with an attorney to go through all of their rights and options, what they're worried about, and what their goals are. At the end of that session, they basically get a roadmap that says, here are our options, usually 4 to 6 options. Here are what the timelines look like. Here are potential costs associated with each option. And then the employee gets to choose what they want to do. Now, some employees are better at picking. More people are decisive than others. And some of them want us to tell them, here's what you should do. We are fine either way. I try to lead people down the right path for what I recommend, but I'm not a pushy person, and we're not pushy. So depending on the employee style, and that's the nice thing about doing a one-to-one session is employees then we're able to customize it to the employee. The other thing that they tend to get out of it is good resource lists. I try to provide them with as many resources as possible. If we identify other issues that are kind of tangential to the financial problem, for example, they don't have car insurance or something like that, we can get some resources in there to limit their liability and the risk associated with that. If they get in a car accident, they're going to have a whole lot more than just a debt problem at that point. So that's what the employee gets out of the session. Now, some employers, we've come up with a custom program where they get an initial session, they get a follow-up in 2 to 3 months, and that's all customized with the employer when we're talking about what their goals are for the program and what they're looking to get out of it. It is a 1-year program, so when the contract is 1 year on it, so employees have up to a year to use their initial session, their individual sessions. And then on the renewal, we talk about, okay, how did it work? There's statistics that we compile. The employer does not know which employees actually use the program because that's part of the attorney-client privilege and pulling the employer out as the middleman. But they do get numbers on how many people use the program, and we do anonymous surveys afterwards on the effectiveness of the program. So that's that question. Any other questions? Don't see anything else up there. So if you have questions, you just want to email me offline, that's fine. It's jen@jenleelaw.com. Or if you just want to sit down and chat about how it possibly could work in your company, let me know. And thank you for attending today. I look forward to talking to you all soon. Thanks.